Hey friends, this is Karen from Blue Rooster Farm, and we picked a bunch of green beans just recently. We gave a lot to our family, but we have these left over. I have snapped them and trimmed the ends off, and now we are ready to can them. So if you are new to canning or you've never canned green beans before, stick around, I'll show you how. Thanks for sticking around. Well, if you stuck around, that means you either have not canned before and you want to learn some of the basics, or you've not canned green beans before and want to see how green beans are canned. Green beans are a low acid food, and that means that you're going to have to pressure can them. So you cannot water bath them. You must have a pressure canner, and that is different than a pressure cooker. It is something totally different. So don't think you can get your Instant Pot out and can something. You have to use a pressure canner. Before you can, you need to prep your beans. You need to clean them well. You need to snap and stem and then set them aside. They are ready to go. We are going to be cold packing these green beans, so it's going to make this super simple. The other thing, if you plan on adding salt to your green beans before you can them, you want to be sure you have some canning salt on hand, or you can use pink salt or any kind of sea salt. Don't use regular table salt. It has iodine and other additives, and it might make the quality of your produce in your jars not as nice. So canning salt, if you want to add salt to your jars, you don't have to. That's just your preference. The other thing, if you are canning and this is something that you're just starting to do, you may be looking for resources. And one of the things that I purchased many years ago was the complete book of Home Preserving by Ball. Now, Ball puts out all sorts of canning booklets every couple of years, and you can find them with the canning supplies at your local stores. This right here has all the basic recipes, and you can find all the times and the temperatures and how to get your jars filled and what methods to use. I really like this book and I recommend it if you're looking for a good canning book. The recipe that we're using today is one that is in this book, but it's probably the same for every canning. The USDA National Home Preservation uh, book also would probably have the exact same details as this book, but this is a nice one. It has also lots of different salsas and sauces and things like that, so that you can kind of add a little bit of extra to your canned goods. Now, I said that since this is a low acid vegetable, we are going to have to use a pressure canner. And I've got my pressure canner right here. And mine is a Presto. I have two of these. There's all kinds and all different brand names, but this is an affordable one and I've really enjoyed it. It works very well for me. Now, when I purchased this, it has a standard weight right here, a regulator, and it is too heavy for my elevation. I live in Missouri. I'm less than 1,000 feet above sea level. So I have to have 10 pounds of pressure. And I think the pressure on that gauge is like 15, but they have the gauge right here. And so you'll have to, if you keep that gauge, you'll have to watch your gauge here and turn down your heat if it goes over 10 pounds of pressure. And I don't like to have to babysit my pressure canner. So on Amazon, I just found a regulating weight that you can add weights to. And so this is now 10 pounds. And when I put it on that air valve right there, it starts rocking and moving when there's 10 pounds of pressure. And this gauge will show you that it's about 10 pounds of pressure. Sometimes it's a little bit higher, which is fine. But this tells me that I'm at the right pressure. And that way I can just listen and make sure that this is always rocking. I don't have to go up and look and see what my temperature is. If it gets higher than 10 pounds, this releases that air and keeps it there. So I really suggest, if you have a canner that has a heavier weight than your area, check out Amazon. You have to look at the model of your canning equipment, but you can probably find an adjustable weight, and that makes it so much easier. So your lid consists of your vent, and you want to make sure that when you start canning for the season, and every time you can, that there's nothing in here, so you can hold it up to the light and look. You can blow through it. You can take a toothpick, you can take a needle, a pipe cleaner, and clean that out if you need to. You also have a safety lock right here. When the pressure is too high, it will pop up. It will lock your pan so that you can't take it off even if you wanted to, because that would be a hazard. And so this is a built-in safety device right here. Then you have a rubber plug in a hole right here, which if the pressure for some reason gets out of control, this rubber plug will pop out, release the steam before anything bad happens, like exploding of a pressure canner, which several people have heard horror stories like that from a long time ago. But today's equipment is so much safer. And if you take care of it and you know that everything's working properly, there's nothing to fear about working with a pressure canner. So you want to make sure all of that is good shape. You also want to make sure that the rubber gasket that is in your pressure canner is in good shape. And at the beginning of each canning season, I check mine to make sure I don't need to purchase another one. You can purchase these, and Amazon, the dealership, a lot of hardware stores have them. You can also purchase the rubber safety plug there. I don't know about the other things. I would think once they go bad, if this goes bad, I think you'd have to rely on your regulator. And if this goes bad, I'm sure that there's probably something you can replace to fix that. So these things can last a lifetime if you take care of them. In the bottom of your pressure canner, you're going to have a rack. And this rack is what you set your cans on. You don't ever want to set your jars, or I should say your jars on. You don't ever want to set your jars directly on the bottom of your canner. That could cause your jars to break during canning. So you'll always want to have some kind of rack, and that way you can safely can. Now this canner can stack pints. I can get 2 stacks of pint jars. That means I can do one level, put a rack in between, and do a second level. They will fit. It will do one level of quarts, and I believe it's 7 quarts. I'm thinking it's 9 or 10 pints and 7 quarts. So what you're going to need to do in order to start canning is you're going to need to fill your canner with the appropriate amount of water. This canner states that it needs 3 quarts of water, which is going to be about here. This is not a water canner. That means you are not putting the jars in and filling it above the jars by an inch. That is the water canning method. This is pressure canning. You only need enough water at the bottom, and your pressure canner will tell you how much it needs. Different ones need different amounts just to get the steam developed and make sure there's enough in there to last the whole processing time. Sometimes there are things that you need to process for 90 minutes. And even though you have this little weight, you're losing steam. And so you need to make sure you have the adequate amount of water. You don't want your canner to dry. If it goes dry, then you're going to have problems. All right. So this one takes 3 quarts. I'm going to fill it up with 3 quarts of water. I'm going to put it on the stove, start getting it warm. Now we are doing a cold pack method for our green beans. Saying that, we're putting them in the jars cold, but we're adding hot boiling water to them. So they're not going to be super hot when we put them in the canner. But I'm going to go ahead and get my water warmed up because it will make it quicker to can. So I'm going to take a few minutes. I'm going to bring my jars out. I'm going to get this on the stove. I'll bring my boiling water over and I'll show you how to fill the jars. I'll be right back. All right, brought my jars over. You do not have to sterilize your jars, just wash them in hot soapy water. The process of canning will sterilize them. Also, I choose largemouth jars for green beans. You don't have to, and sometimes I run out of my largemouth and I have to use the narrow mouth, but it makes it a lot easier to pack and also a lot easier to remove the beans when you're using them. I also have I guess it's a skewer to debubble with, and my lids and my rings. So, and I've got a funnel here. I'm not sure if I'll need it for these or not, since these are pretty much just using your hands. Now, when you are putting green beans in your jars, you want to make sure they are packed in there good. Because if not, when you can, your beans are going to go to the top and you're going to have a whole bunch of water at the bottom and you're going to be saying, well, I could have got a lot more beans in that jar. And so push the green beans down, make sure they're packed in there nicely. If you have smaller size beans that are snapped smaller, it's a little easier to do that. So here I have, you can see my jar, but you can see a big air spot right here. That's a big space that's going to have a lot of liquid in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to push down and I can add more green beans. So don't hesitate using your strength and pushing those beans down. Now you're going to want to have 1 inch headspace, and 1 inch headspace is down to the shoulders of the jars. So here's a jar. The bottom ring is right above the shoulder. Here's the shoulder of the jar. This top part right here, that is 1 inch. Now, if you go more than 1 inch, you might have problems with siphoning. So be careful. I find that most of my siphoning comes from the change in temperature. Like if I take it out of the canner too soon and didn't have a chance to set, it will more likely siphon. So then I'm going to go through and I'm going to smash and press, not hard, but put some weight into it and pack my green beans in. When I bring you back, I'm going to show you how to pour in hot water, salt, put the lids on, the rings, and get them in the canner. So I'll bring you right back. I've got all the green beans in the jars, and I've got several left here still because I know I'm going to be adding a few more once I get the water in and I get debubbling. I know I can push some beans around and add a few more. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add salt to my jars, and I'm going to add a teaspoon of salt per quart. Now, if you were doing pints, it would be a half a teaspoon. You can do green beans in pints too. Okay. Then I have my boiling water right here. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to use a ladle and I'm going to put water in the green beans about halfway up. That way I can kind of poke around a little bit and push down and then add more beans if I need to, and then top it off with water. So let me go ahead and add boiling water to all of my jars about halfway up. When we planted our garden this year, I told my husband we don't need too many green beans. Let's just plant enough to kind of have some to eat fresh, because we still have plenty of canned green beans from last year. We had a good crop last year. And, you know, maybe we'll put up a few for this year, but didn't really want to have to do too much of the green beans. But we are having quite the green bean crop, and it started so early. We picked these in the middle of June. Now we are needing rain. It's getting dry out in our area. The grass has turned brown, or brown spots. So far, we haven't had to water the mulched areas of our garden. I do have to water my flowers in the pots, and any place that I don't have them mulched, I do water those. But if we continue to have dry weather, we may have to get a few soaker hoses and just give a little extra water to some of the corn or beans. But right now, everything is looking good. Nothing looks like it's hurting. My zucchini do have cucumber beetles on them, and so I'm kind of fighting that war right now. But I am okay if I can just get a nice big handful of zucchini just to make a few things like zucchini bread, zucchini cake, maybe dry some, and then I should be okay. I still have some canned, and I still have some shredded and frozen in the freezer, but I like to have the fresh. So if once I get a good crop, they can have the plants. So what I'm doing here is I am taking this skewer and I am going down the sides and I am getting out air bubbles. And then as the air bubbles come out, the beans can go down a little bit and I can add more green beans. Remember, we don't want the green beans to go over the shoulder of the jar. So this one right here, go to the water level there. This one right here looks good. Okay, they're packed in there pretty good. So we'll set that one there and we'll keep doing that. Debubbling. Andy got a hold of the potato beetles. He was able to go out there every day or so and pick them off and put them in a jar of soapy water, and finally took care of those, and they didn't really do any damage, so we were thankful for that. I do have cucumber plants that are quite some distance from the zucchini, so I'm hoping the cucumber beetles stay away from my cucumber plants. And then, of course, Japanese beetles. Probably a lot of you are dealing with that as well. They are on my zinnias right now, which out of everything, I guess that's okay, but I do have more than just the one patch, so, but I still hate to see them. I hope they stay off our apple trees and the rest of our produce. It looks like we're going to have corn here in just a day or two, and we'll see what that sweet corn that we were showing you in the garden tour looks like. It is a small ear, but it is going to be early. Now we have another variety that has tasseled out and is doing really, really well, that has a larger ear on it, that will be also fairly early, but not as early as that sweet corn that had the really short date on it. So as you see, as I take out the air bubbles, I check to see if I can get a few more beans in there, press them down, and top it off with the water. Now I could be, and I'll go ahead and do that now. I'm going to wipe the rim. Now, if this were sticky, like sugary, or it was a thick sauce or something, I would be using vinegar to wipe the rim down. But since this is just water, I don't need to use anything like that. And I just wipe my rim. I just put my lid, and these are just washed, they're not sanitized, and my ring, fingertip tight. And I've got one ready for the canner. Two. Three. And then the only other pest that we have right now is, or are, rabbits. And they're kind of funny because they can get through the electric fence, but they're really not bothering anything right now because most plants are so big out there. But they are running. We see them running around the yard, and then the dogs get a whiff of them, and then they go chasing. And of course, once the rabbit gets to the field fence, they go through it, and the dogs can't go through that field fence. So they're sitting there barking and wanting to get over and go after the rabbit, but they need to be a little quicker and spot them a little sooner. Whenever you're cleaning the rims of your jars, also make sure you are feeling to see that there's no nicks on the jar rim. If there are nicks, then you need to dispose of that jar or use it for another purpose. Put the beans in a new jar, because it will not seal correctly if there's any imperfection on the rim of your jar. I don't know that if I told you this, but these are jade green beans. We really like jade. They are uniform. They are flavorful. They are deep green. We really like them. So we always have some jade. And then we have a couple of other, oh, maybe these are Timu. We either have, I can't remember which ones. These are jade, but then we have another kind out in the garden because we have a second planting, and that is a different kind. I'm going to have to ask my husband what those were because he put those out. This one I might have just a little bit full. Our raspberries, I think, have finally finished giving us berries. We can go out there and get a nice handful, but not anything worth going out and standing in the heat and picking. We did get many gallons of raspberries that we have in the freezer, and we will be using those for different things. Usually I will freeze the raspberries because it's usually in the middle of a busier time, like green beans and things like that. And so if I want to make jam or jelly, I will do that sometimes even in the winter time. But when it's not as busy, and I just take them out of the freezer and make them from frozen berries. Our tomatoes are looking really, really good. Our peppers are looking good. We've been getting peppers off of them. Of course, the banana sweet peppers are always early, and we've had lots of those. One of the mini bell peppers that I have, it's a smaller one, but there are just tons of little peppers everywhere on each little plant. And so it's going to be a one that produces a lot. We usually have the best season for peppers at the end of summer. They really start putting on, and we really start getting a lot at the end of summer. But we have plenty during the summer for salsa making and eating and cooking. So, but at the end, they just really go to town, and that's when we start picking them right before the frost and getting them preserved in different ways, whether it be freezing, drying, canning. We get those taken care of. Whoops, I don't think I wiped that jar rim. See, I start talking and I forget what I'm doing. Probably have missed something while I've been talking. All right, so I'm going to put the 7 cans in the canner, and we just have a little bit here that I'm going to boil up for dinner because we enjoy having them fresh the best. I mean, that's the best thing. We also enjoy frozen, but it takes up freezer space, and so we have started canning them now just because freezer space is more valuable for other things. All right, I'll get these in the canner. I will set the, well, let me tell you. Now that these go into the canner, what we'll do is I will put the lid on, lock it up, but I will not put the weight on the vent. I will turn up the heat to pretty high, and I will let it heat. And once it starts steaming out the air vent, and it's going pretty good, I will wait 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, I will put the weight on the steam vent, and I will turn the temperature down very gradually. Well, actually, I don't turn it down then. I will let it go ahead and keep going, and it will go to the 10 pounds of pressure for my area, and that weight will start shaking. Once it goes to that 10 pounds of pressure, then I'll gradually turn down the dial, because really, when you're canning, it doesn't need to have high heat. It just needs to maintain the heat that's in there. And so a lot of times I'm finding that the sweet spot is almost at low, but I'll do it gradually because I need to keep that pressure in there. So if I notice my pressure is going down, I'll turn it back up. But make sure you get the right pressure and you maintain that pressure for 30 minutes for quarts. Quarts need 30 minutes, and let me see what pints need. I believe it's 20 or 25, but I will look right here. 20 minutes for pints. Oh, and I was wrong. 25 for quarts. So green beans in quarts need 25 minutes of canning time. So once the pressure is at 10 pounds, that's my area, I will start timing. If at any time the pressure drops below 10 for some reason, and my pressure is below 10 pounds, I need to start back over. I need to bring it back up to 10 pounds of pressure, and I need to re-time starting 30 minutes again. So it's very important that you get your pressure even. So once I get these in, 10 pounds of pressure, I start timing 30 minutes. At the end of 30 minutes, I turn the heat off and I let the pressure canner set. And it will set probably, well, I'm not even going to say. It will set and it will reduce its pressure naturally. And it's going to take a while to cool down. Depends on the temperature of your room and how many jars you have in there too. And then once it's cooled down and the pressure in the pan is at 0 and your safety lock has gone down, you can open it very carefully. I tilt the lid and set the lid on the canner just a little bit so a little bit of air can come out, and then I wait 10 minutes because I don't want to have the water coming out of my jars. So I let it acclimate to the temperature in the room, and then after 10 minutes I remove from my pot and put on a towel or a mat. You don't want to set your hot jars on a cold counter. You want to put it on a towel or a mat. And then they'll need to sit for 24 hours and seal. And then you could take the bands off and you can also clean them. I would give them a good cleaning so that if there's any bean juice that siphoned out of your jars, it's not going to cause mold or anything while it's being stored. Okay, I've got all 7 quarts into the Presto canner. And as you see, 7 quarts are what will fit at the bottom of it. And so I am now going to put my lid on, and I'm going to do this one-handed. So bear with me. I didn't want to move my stand with my camera on it and have to set it all up. Okay, so what we do here is there on the lid, it says close this way, open this way, and then there's an arrow. On the bottom handle of your pot, you have an arrow. We need to match this arrow with this arrow. So what I'm going to do, let me kind of set this on there. Doing it one-handed is kind of tricky. There we go. When you set it directly down, it will close the pan. Now it's closed, but it's not locked. In order to lock it, we need to move this handle over here. And let's see if I have enough hand strength to do that. We're going to turn it until it locks. Now our pressure canner is locked. Okay. Now if we look at our dial says 0. My hand over here. 0 pounds of pressure, and that's right because we don't have any, where's my weight back there? Any weight on our valve. It's wide open. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn this temperature all the way up to high, and we are going to let this come up to boiling. And when we see steam coming out of here really easily, you're going to see it shooting out. We're going to turn the timer on for 10 minutes, and we're going to let it vent for 10 minutes. I'll bring you back when the steamer starts venting. Okay, it just started venting. It's coming out at a steady pressure. I'm going to keep the heat turned up close to high. and I'm going to turn my timer on for 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, I'm going to put my weight on, and then I will wait until it starts jiggling. Once it starts jiggling, I'll check my pressure regulator there, and it will tell me how many pounds. It should be at 10 pounds, which on this one right here is at the very top. And once it's at 10 pounds, I will start timing. Remember, 25 minutes for quarts, 20 minutes for pints. Our weight is jiggling. Our pressure is at 10 pounds. I set the timer for 25 minutes. I've got the heat at about, a little bit below medium. It could probably go lower. I'll just see if it starts shaking a little faster, and if it does, I can turn it down a little bit more and get it to be a little bit not as rough. And we'll just do this for 25 minutes, and then after 25 minutes, I'll turn it off and let it come down to 0 pounds of pressure. I'll bring it back and we'll get ready to open it. Our gauge is showing 0 pounds of pressure. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to carefully lift up our weight. Nothing is coming out, so we know that the steam buildup has completely dissipated. So now what we need to do is we need to open it up carefully, and you do so by turning, and it's kind of hard at that angle. Let me try this. There we go. Turning it and then lifting it. Now you always want to lift it away from you because there's very hot steam that comes out, just like that. Okay, so I'm going to just put the lid like this so that there's some escaping air here, and I'm going to let it set for 10 minutes, and then we'll take the jars out. Okay, it's been 10 minutes. I took the lid off, and we're going to pull a jar out here. And these are still very, very hot, so you need to be really careful. And you don't want to tilt them. You want to keep them straight up and down. And I don't know if this is a good spot to look at these or not. But here we have a green bean. I don't see any siphoning. The liquid still goes all the way to the top. You can see it's still bubbling inside there, so it looks like this is probably going to be a good seal. I'm going to take all of these out and set them on the counter on a mat, and I'll show a picture of them. There they are. It looks to me like all of them are going to seal. They're all still bubbling. That tells me there's pressure inside. They're pressurized. I don't see any lack of water in any of them, so we didn't have any major siphoning at all. Also, I don't see a big space at the bottom where it's just liquid. Looks like they were packed nicely so that they are all well spread out in there, and I got my maximum capacity of beans in those jars. I hope you learned something or enjoyed watching this video on how to can green beans. If you did, please consider subscribing. I would also appreciate if you'd share or like or comment on my video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.